Tired of an insurrection that you incited against your government? Is your state slowly turning into the next ice age because of your failed leadership to help? Sign up for a TED cruise as you escape to beautiful Cruz, Mexico. Leave all your constituents and your constitution back home as you bask in the warm rays of the white sandy beaches. Your constituents don't have power? Well, that's okay, because you can feel right at home at the beautiful Mayan ruins where there is no electricity and the drinking water is always bad. Your constituents low on supplies such as food and water? That's okay too, because you can eat at one of our many all-you-can-eat buffets, and no, you may not take any leftovers home to your constituents. It's against Cruz rules. Flee the seditions of Texas and come to beautiful Cruz, Mexico. Live from P&D Studios, it's This Week Live with Rocky Red Panda. This week's the good, the bad, and the special guest Peter Nicholas. And here's your host, Rocky Red Panda. Welcome to This Week Live. I never get tired of saying that. I am still your host, Rocky Red Panda. It is the week of February 21st, 2021. You know, this introduction sounds way too formal to be a true introduction. I just don't like it. Give me a moment. Script. Where's the script? Found it. Found a lot of other things. Found my script. Alright. So what we got going here. Okay. Actually, no. We can write. Better. Boom. I think we got it. By golly, I think we got it. Alright. So let's try this again from the top. I think it should be better. So, here we goes nothing. Insert. Ba-da-bum-bum. Hey there, folks. I am Rocky Red Panda. This is This Week Live. Welcome to the show. That even sounds way more formal than the last one. Screw it. We gotta go for it. We gotta do it. You know, I got a show to do, folks. So, but let's continue on. So this is our Ash Wednesday cruising into Winter Mayhem episode. I mean, what's left to give up for Lent? Hey, you want a kidney? Yes, it's finger licking good. Fava beans. Fava beans. Little Hannibal Lecter going there. They had a drive-through Ash service due to COVID. Check this out, you guys.
The Ash and Dash is underway here in White Oak, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a drive-through Ash distribution on this Ash Wednesday. Are not putting ashes on foreheads as they usually do. Instead, they are handing ashes out.
Patches with that are made of sackcloth, which is a traditional sign of penitence, marked with a cross. And people can have this for all of Lent, not just for Ash.
Amen. Amen. But seriously, so let's jump right into this week's The Good, The Bad, and The That's where we poke fun at some of this week's news, and yes, all politics are still on the table. But let's go ahead and toss this week's card. Oh boy. I seem to be losing things here. Card. Let's see here. We got pen. pen, marker. Oh, we need that poop. Don't know what that's for. Expo. Oh, there it is. Found it. Found the card. That's right. So I found this week's card after chucking a lot of things out there. It's like I chucked my whole pen drawer. But the good, the bad, and the hot. So what's one more thing to chuck? 3, 2, 1. Whoosh. Alright. Fly like the wind, buddy. Fly like the wind. So let's go ahead and jump right into the impeachment trials. A week late to give you an answer, but that's because he was acquitted. Yes, you heard it right. Trump was acquitted. A total of 43 Republicans voted to acquit, while 7 voted to impeach him. This came right after I finished recording last week's episode, so it was like, do I add it into this week's episode, which would cause me to refilm, or do I add it into next week's episode? I aimed for the latter to do and said next week's episode, so here it is. I won't go into too much detail, but we have a lot to talk about this week, so again, won't go into too much detail. I will say, though, to the Republicans who voted to acquit Trump, shame on you. You had one job, and you failed to impeach. The reasoning? You cannot impeach someone once they're out of office. But yet when Nancy Pelosi handed in articles of impeachment to Mitch McConnell back in January, he said, I won't accept them until after Joe Biden has taken office, which contradicts the speech he made.
I've made my view of this episode very plain. But our system of government gave the Senate a specific task. The Constitution gives us a particular role. This body is not invited to act as the nation's overarching moral tribunal. If President Trump were still in office, I would have carefully considered whether the House managers proved their specific charge. But in this case, the question is moot because former President Trump is constitutionally not eligible for conviction. Donald Trump was the president when the House voted, though not when the House chose to deliver the papers. We have no power to convict and disqualify a former office holder who is now a private citizen.
You know, all of this makes it sound like a superhero movie. Yeah, you know, the movie where the villains go in to save the day and defeat the good guys. I'll get you next time. Next time. No, that never happens. But let's move on to the great state of New York, where Governor Cuomo is under investigation. That's right. The FBI and U.S. Attorney in Brooklyn are probing Cuomo's administration on nursing homes. And yet, we thought he was one of the good guys. Now I see him wearing blue. Not on purpose for Democrats, but... so the story goes that he held back data for nursing home deaths. Now, doesn't that sound like another state? Oh, right. Maryland, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Bueller.
Bueller, 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 Bueller.
So people in New York are upset, like this Assemblyman Ron Kim, who said Governor Cuomo called him directly on Thursday to threaten his career if he did not cover up for Melissa and what she said. I mean, it's like New York City paying Hillary Clinton $2 million as a consultant for New Year's Eve because he wanted an expert on dropping the ball. Oh my gosh, that was bad. Not that Kumo wouldn't know anything about dropping the ball at the last moment. Both Republicans and Democrats are wanting to strip away his pandemic powers because of his fiasco, and some Republicans are setting up a means for impeachment. It's just like here in Pennsylvania. Impeach Wolf. Get him out of office. No, he's done a good job. You're drunk, you're crazy, go home. Get out, go home. Go. But I swear, I mean, what's up with this impeachment? It seems like it's trending all over. I kind of liked it better when it was underground. But now let's move down to deep within the heart of Texas, where a huge winter storm has left many Texans without power. On a day where we are to celebrate the landing of the Perseverance with NASA, we are instead sending our best wishes to those who have been affected by the last blast of winter weather that we received. We're thinking of you, Texas. However, during this storm, Texas got hit with over a foot of snow and ice, which in turn affected their power grids like trying to shove a 3-pronged plug into a 2-pronged outlet. Folks, you know it's bound to fail. Yes, Timmy, try it, because if he doesn't, he will never learn. The real question everyone is asking is, who is to blame over these power issues? As of yesterday, most want to blame it on the renewable energy, like solar and wind, for the power going out, much like this tweet where someone seriously got schooled. Yeah, right. But I mean, just listen to this.
Deadly deal for the United States of America. Texas is blessed with multiple sources of energy, such as natural gas and oil and nuclear, as well as solar and wind. But you saw from what Trace said, and that is our wind and our solar got shut down, and they were collectively more than 10% of our power grid. And that thrust Texas into a situation where it was lacking power in a statewide basis. If the Biden administration is going to try to eradicate fossil fuels in the United States, every state is going to constantly have challenges like what America has seen take place in Texas right now.
Governor Abbott, yes, a Republican, Don Jr., not a Democrat, blames the outage in Texas on the Green New Deal. But keep in mind that while all of this bickering is happening, Texans are suffering. Now, during the storm, there has been an estimated 28 plus people who have died. There's video of people sleeping in their cars with their heat on. And there's videos of people making makeshift bed forts to keep them warm. All of this while power is slowly returning to the residents who are now discovering they have an over $10,000 electric bill. I wonder who can help the citizens pay for that. I know. How about this guy? Oh yes, Ted Cruz. He can cruise, no harm, right? Oh, that was horrible. But wrong. While the people of Texas suffer, what does he do? He says, "Adios, amigos," as he hops on a plane bound for sunny Cancun, Mexico, with his family. He states that his daughters asked to go on vacation to Cancun, so who is to deny their daughters a trip, right? Right. And if someone asked you to start an insurrection against your own government, you would do it? Right. Mm-hmm. Want to really know how bad Texas is? Here is a road. One side is in Arkansas, perfectly clean, and the other side unplowed, that is in Texas. Fans frozen over inside this apartment. Toilets are frozen over. People are burning furniture and bills to stay warm. I hope that bill was not something you really needed, but yeah, we don't need great-grandmother's priceless hope chest anymore. It's everyone for themselves. One family was burning their children's toys to keep them warm. Need I remind you, where was the senator while all this is happening? Hey, I found him. Right here. There he is. Cruising on a plane headed to a country where he okayed a wall being built. That's right. Build that darn wall. Viva la Mexico! But more precisely, Cancun, Mexico. Now here's a photo of Ted reading about his constituents he's leaving behind in Texas to suffer. Suffer, my constituents. Remind me never to do that again. As soon as he got there, the power of the media was strong with this one. He booked a flight back to Texas. He said,
I started having second thoughts almost the moment I sat down on the plane, because on the one hand, all of us who are parents have a responsibility to take care of our kids, take care of our family. That's something Texans have been doing across the state. But I also have a responsibility that I take very seriously of fighting for the state of Texas and frankly, leaving when so many Texans were hurting didn't feel right, and so I changed my return flight and flew back.
He also stated, I went because I just saw Coco. I wanted to know if everything was real. Everything is real, Ted. The snow, the ice, no electricity, no water. Yes, Ted, it's real. Deal with it, buddy. Now, another climate news. We just rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement. Essentially, we're rejoining everything that our previous frat brother dropped us from. Yo! I think it's time to party, bro! And save the environment! Chug, 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 chug! Party on! Woo! The environment. And lastly, we gotta talk about Myanmar in my Myanmar update. The latest from inside Myanmar is a 20-year-old woman has died after being shot in the head at Myanmar anti-coup protests. So, this kind of angers me. But it's baffling. She was a 20-year-old supermarket worker shot on February the 9th and has died this past Friday. She is now being seen as a martyr for the Myanmar people and what they are using her image and likeness towards the fight for democracy. There's a saying, people shouldn't be afraid of their government. Government should be afraid of their people. Here in America, there is a group that I follow on Facebook that I will share with you. Check out and follow a group called Free Myanmar Campaign USA. They update frequently with live videos of marches, protests, and hopes to unify Burmese communities and take necessary steps to promote the voice of democracy in Myanmar. Now, what does Myanmar people want? Democracy. When do they want it? Now. They want to free their president. So let's show the Burmese people that we stand with them in their fight for democracy. I gotta do the 3 fingers. We stand for their fight for democracy. So we'll be right back with this week's special guest, Peter Nicholas, after this commercial break. Hey there, folks. This is Rocky Red Panda, your host of This Week Live, P&D Studios, and illustrator at Panda Numeric Designs. Are you looking to get official This Week Live, P&D Studio, and Panda Numeric Design merchandise? That's right. Go to my website at pandaanddesigns.com, click on the shop, which will take you to some sweet, sweet stuff via my online Etsy store. And welcome back, you guys. So we're here with this week's guest, Peter Nicholas. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So first off, I gotta ask you about the weather in Texas. How are things down there? Because I know with the news and everything, it looks pretty bad.
It is cold, ice cold. I mean, it is. I should have had like a freezing background behind me because it's just, it has been a nightmare down here. I actually grew up in Northern Virginia outside of DC, so I'm kind of used to the snow and the freezing temperatures and all that. But the big problem in Texas is that we have absolutely no infrastructure to handle this at all. Yeah. So it's been a complete nightmare. I mean, there's no salt trucks. I saw the plow they're using is like it's like a regular construction truck that they're just kind of like trying to take off as much ice as they can. But it's been a nightmare, man.
I can tell because this is weather that Texas is not what I like to consider accustomed to.
Yes,
because it's mostly sunny, or hot sunny, and tornadoes and floods. That's really about it.
I saw something that in other states it's it's considered gentlemanlike for a man to open up the door for a woman. In Texas, it's gentlemanlike to turn on the AC first and then let her in.
Oh my goodness!
Because it's just so hot here, man.
Yeah, that's funny. So we'll get back to Texas here in a few, but let's go ahead and talk about your channel, Citizen Pete. So
yes, sir.
I'll kind of explain to the viewers what exactly you do with Citizen Pete, because there's a lot going on, especially in your background.
Oh, sure, yeah, and I got a ton of different backgrounds too. So, so Citizen Pete is a political commentary show. I try to talk politics and have a little bit of fun talking politics, make fun of folks on the left and the right, because hey, you gotta be bipartisan about it. But I've always loved politics, and I kind of during the lockdown, I just kind of had a little bit of time on my hands, and I've always wanted to do like a political show, and so I decided to just jump into it and make it happen. And so I'm at a little over, I think, 334 subscribers now, and it's slowly growing, but it's kind of blow up in a way I didn't even think was ever possible. But yeah, I'm just kind of having a lot of fun with it, trying to avoid getting shut down by YouTube talking politics, but I'm just taking it one video at a time.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about that one also later, because I do have that on my list. But why politics? I mean, what's this big to do about politics? Because that's all everyone seems to have been kind of focused on in 2020, and now it's kind of rolled over to 2021. I mean, why do a political commentary show like The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, or why do something like that?
And that's what I would love it to be one day. I mean, the great Jon Stewart. But I think I was talking this with my friend, and I think for a lot of folks, politics, they kind of feel like it doesn't really affect them at all. They feel very distanced from it. And so one of the motivations for doing the show was trying to explain things to folks in maybe a simpler way. So if you don't watch political stuff all the time, it's a way for you to get easy access to that information. And I think one of the real reasons why it's blown up so much in 2020 and now in 2021 is that, we're all dealing with this pandemic. We're all dealing with, kind of the chaos. It's kind of going on a bit with the government there, trying to, deal with this. And so now I think politics has kind of been forced on people because this pandemic has been such a life-changing thing for so many folks.
All right. So where do you see this channel going within the next few years? I mean, do you see this as blowing up? Do you see yourself just sticking to politics, or do you see yourself to say, well, let's talk about other things in the news?
Oh yeah, so I've actually kind of started doing that a little bit now. I kind of just started politics, just talking about what's going on in DC, and now I've kind of branched out a little bit to covering just kind of the world in general, social issues. I just did a video on Morgan Wallen, the country star who maybe said the wrong word, but I kind of turned that. It was a little bit of a mistake. I did the intro for it, and I'm like, a country star said a word that was bad that he shouldn't, and you're never going to guess which word it is. But I use that as a conversation, or use that to start a conversation about why really no one should be saying the N-word, So I try to take things like that and, bring it into like a bigger context.
Beautiful. And then lastly, you talk about video production. So tell us a little bit about your video production.
So I actually, I do this kind of more political show thing for fun. It's like a fun hobby. It's a fun outlet for me to talk politics. But really my main gig is owning a video production company. And I've been producing content, and, I've been doing it for 11 or 12 years now. I guess,
that's amazing.
Yeah, 12 years now. 12 years. Yeah, I kind of started in 2009. I got an associate's degree in film studies in LA, and the nice thing working about LA is you're in Hollywood there. So that's where I started out, and I kind of my career kind of jumped from there. So I've done broadcast news. I've done, feature films, short films, big and small. I've worked at studios here and there. So yeah, man, it's just been all kind of, and now I do mostly corporate marketing films, getting into live streaming, which is such a massive thing for folks now with this pandemic. So yeah, just keep rocking and rolling, man.
Beautiful. Especially, I think the thing everyone's using now is Twitch. That seems to be, especially for gamers, Twitch is the whole live stream thing. I've yet to get into it. I do have my little capture card and everything's ready. It's just, when I'm ready,
Twitch is
I'll do it.
Pretty popular. And I actually I do stream the Twitch, but I don't really do much with it. I just kind of send it out to everyone. But the funny thing, one of the things that really kind of blew up my channel and really blew up something for politics everyone around the country is when the Capitol was stormed. And I actually used a lot of I did a live stream. I did like a 7-hour live stream because I have a friend in the news, and he sent me a video showing people storming the Capitol. And so I just started streaming as soon as I started that video, and I just found live videos in DC. And some of the videos I used were Twitch videos because it's now everyone kind of have with their phone. You have like a production studio in your phone. You can go live from your phone. So it really it's kind of changed the game.
Exactly. All right. So we'll be right back after a short commercial break with more from Peter Nicholas. So guys, stay tuned. Sendo Teki Ramen. Ano Ramen o Taparu. Hydro ni Sendo Teki. Nippon si Teki Zakaru. Kapu Tedo Kuruzu. Kapu Tedo Karuzu. Kapu Tedo Kuruzu Instanto Ramen. Sendo wa ko hodo oishikata koto ga nai. This Week Live with Rocky Red Panda, only on PNG Studios. Make sure to like and subscribe. All right, you guys, and welcome back. We're here with Peter Nicholas. He has his little show, host of Citizen Pete. So we're going to be playing a little thing we call something came up is called News Roundtable, where we break down some of the top news stories, kind of what's hitting right now in the news. So
sounds good. I'll comment on what I can because hopefully I got internet, or luckily I've had internet sparingly the last couple of days. So
this first one should be up your alley because we're gonna go back to Texas, because recently Texas governor calls for investigation into the state power grid. Evidently, the power grid in Texas, their excuse was, well, we were not prepared for something like this. We only prepared for warm weather, not for weather like this. And the way you explained the snow plows and everything, I mean, he had about 20 people who have died so far.
Yeah, I think it's up
people.
to 28 now, I think.
28. That's amazing. And the governor is now asking for this investigation into this power grid situation. And there's still millions of people in Texas that don't have power, that don't have heat, especially the elderly. And they're having these, what you call, warm-up stations where people can go to these little hubs and they can huddle in together around fires and to warm up.
Yeah, I personally have a neighbor who said her home is at 55 degrees yesterday, and they have no power, no heat. And she has another neighbor that their house is 36. It's an important thing to remember here in Texas. The homes are designed to cool because usually it's so hot. But yeah, there should be an investigation, but it kind of begins and ends with the Republican conservative politics here. A lot of the blame for this is really on Texas not being connected to the national grid, the national infrastructure. And the reason they did that was to avoid regulation, right? Like, there's certain areas that you have to do things like, or if you're a part of the national grid under federal mandate, you have to do things like weatherizing stuff. You have to make sure things are prepared for this type of temperatures. And Texas got away without doing any of that because it's not part of the national grid. And so there's a lot of folks out here kind of went the cheap route, and basically that we're getting screwed by that now because the cheapest is not always the best. So the deregulation that is going on with the federal power grid here is a huge problem. The other problem here in Texas is that Texas is just dominated by identity politics. In the lead up to this storm, you didn't hear anything about, is the power grid going to be okay? Are we prepping? But most of the politicians in Texas were talking about a bill to force the Dallas Mavericks to play the national anthem at their basketball games. So it's just like Texas is constantly dominated by these identity politics things without really focusing on legislation and things that actually improve people's lives.
Well, you're talking about Texas that still is trying to secede from the union, become its own separate country. You're talking about Texas, where you have the newly formed Freedom Party, which is supposed to be Trump's own party now, which is going to be separate from the Republican Party. You're talking about a lot of things in Texas, or as Austin says, keep it weird, Texas.
That's how I do down in Austin, keep it very weird. And it's interesting that, it's, with Texas being so like die hard red, I mean, Austin is like the blue spot in the middle of Texas. And in Austin, like, there's a lot of instances where the Austin City Council will pass something, and then the state, because the capital is located in Austin, will actually come override whatever the city wants to do. And so it's just this constant political battle back and forth here without really focusing on like actually important issues. I actually saw a recent quote from the former governor of Texas, Rick Perry, saying that Texans would rather sit at home in the cold with no power than join the national federal system. I'm like, I know a lot of people here in Texas that would strongly disagree with that.
Then again, it's Rick Perry, so you don't know what he's going to say.
I know. The fact that he was the energy secretary, it's just scary.
That is very scary.
Yeah, at this point, I don't think I trust him to plug in a light bulb, much less run a energy grid.
So, moving from Texas up to Washington, the most of what they talked about was this week, of course, is the impeachment of Trump. He was just acquitted.
Yep.
And every single Republican, except for 7, voted to not impeach him and have him acquitted. So they showed video evidence. They showed new evidence. The Democrats played a hardball game. And then they went around and says, oh, we want to call witnesses. And everyone got scared. It's like, what are we going to do? And here comes Lindsey Graham jumping in saying, well, if you're going to call witnesses, I want 100 witnesses. We're going to draw this one out because under law, legally, you have to hear out the cases of impeachment before you can do any other job within Congress. So that means while they're doing this, that little stimulus bill that's trying to get passed cannot be passed until this impeachment trial is over. So even though you have that, and then of course 7 Republicans, including Scott Perry from Pennsylvania, they're now being all ostracized. They're trying to be saying, "Oh well, you voted to impeach. Well, we're going to try to get you out of the party. You're no longer part of us." And
yes, I believe the Republican GOP actually said this on video. They actually said they sent Pat Toomey to the Senate not to vote his conscience, but to do what they wanted him to do, which is just the craziest thing I've ever heard. And I think this impeachment trial, what really went on here, for everyone who didn't watch it, I get it, there's a lot of long arguments there, but essentially the Democrats presented all the evidence they needed to convict Trump. And at the end, Republicans wanted to call witnesses, and Democrats were originally on board with that. But it turns out Republicans wanted to call, they said 100, then they said 1,000 witnesses. And what they wanted to do, because they knew that Congress has to focus on this, they can't do anything with any stimulus bills. They were essentially hijacking that process and using the American people and this pandemic as leverage against Democrats to end this trial. And it's just it's one of those things where I definitely get why people hate politics. And they just look at politics and they absolutely hate it, because these people who are elected to represent us and to essentially take care of us are just busy fighting back and forth amongst themselves.
Well, it seems like the Republicans, their main goal, if they recall, if they were to call witnesses, and currently as of what they're saying now, is they were trying to blame this whole Black Lives Matter movement with the protests, the damaging of the buildings, the looting, the rioting on Democrats. It's the Democrats' fault that this is happening, especially our vice president, our first African-American South Asian vice president, Kamala Harris. Their main goal was, well, we want to call her as a witness because we want her impeached now. We want to investigate her because of her dealings with setting free some protesters that were arrested for looting and stealing up in Minnesota during the Black Lives Matter protest, because she donated money to it. And I was like, okay, and your point is?
Exactly. They want to compare the two. They want to contrast the two. It's this whole whataboutism type thing, I believe they're kind of calling it. But yeah, and they were blamed Antifa for the riot. They were saying that, it wasn't MAGA folks, it was Antifa that stormed the Capitol. And it's all this they'll do almost anything to avoid kind of taking responsibility for some of these kind of things. And yeah, they basically wanted to turn the impeachment trial into a sham. And they wanted to call Nancy Pelosi, they wanted to call Kamala Harris. That it was just one of those things that were kind of turning the trial into a complete farce, unfortunately, when at the end of the day, I think most folks thought that Trump wasn't going to be convicted, even though he should have been. And Mitch McConnell basically said that in his speech after he voted not to convict.
He waited to the very end to say that. But Nancy Pelosi made a good point. She tried handing over articles of impeachment before Biden was elected, but he refused to accept it. It's like, no, well, I'll take him once we get back from our vacation.
Exactly.
And then he turns around saying, well, since he is not in office anymore, we can't impeach him. It's like, he makes no sense.
And it's one of those things that really shows kind of the unfortunate part of politics. And that, I think Mitch McConnell is, he's a ruthless guy, but he is somewhat of a smart guy. He realizes that 75% of the Republican Party is with Trump no matter what. And so instead of standing up and doing the right thing, he is basically, going down to that mob pressure. He's basically saying, well, if the party says we should convict Trump, we won't convict Trump, even though in his speech afterwards, he practically called for the folks in DC to charge him criminally. He practically came out and asked them to do it.
Well, in a way, that's kind of what they're doing. They're using a law that dates back to 1870s that was made for the KKK, which basically you can charge anyone if you're African American against someone who's not doing their job correctly. And of course, you have 2 of them right now. And of course, one of them's the head of the NAACP who's saying, you know what, I'm going to file a lawsuit. I'm going to use this law against Trump.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and there's And there's other insurrectionist type law and stuff like that. And there's
Correct, yeah.
actually, I think there's something in the 14th Amendment that they're looking at that could actually be passed with a simple majority of Congress, of the Senate, I believe, that would bar Trump from running from office in the future. And so he is by no means completely off the hook for what happened on January 6th, but it would have been nice to see there be a bipartisan condemnation of an insurrection attempt against the United States government.
Yeah. All right. So moving away from Washington, we're going to talk a little bit about racism and this whole Black Lives Matter, because just recently, as of today, they said on the news that charges were dropped against Amy Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember Amy Cooper, she was charged because she was a white woman who called police on a black bird watcher in Central Park. And of course, they just dropped. It's like, oh, we're going to drop all charges against you.
I had not actually heard that. Again, internet's a little spotty now in Texas. That
yeah, I completely understand.
Over. But yeah, I do remember that case. That's it's one of those things, and not to always bring everything back to politics, but it is shocking just the different amount of how the criminal justice kind of system looks at people differently. For example, there's a lot of folks who broke into the Capitol, committed insurrection, and there was a woman who is white here in Texas who got to go on a Mexican vacation, even though she's facing federal charges for storming the Capitol.
That. Exactly. It's like, oh yeah, you're allowed to go to Mexico, have fun. I'm like, she goes, she may never come back.
Exactly.
We just lost her.
Yep.
But in this case of Amy Cooper, they dropped all charges. This is from the Manhattan Supreme Court. They announced that she completed 5 psych educational and therapy sessions that helped her appreciate that racial identities shape our lives and that we cannot use them to harm ourselves and others. I mean, just because you go through these classes doesn't mean you won't do this again in the future.
No, absolutely not. And I can't help but think of, as this Amy Cooper story today, think about the passing of Rush Limbaugh. And the idea that, there's a lot of folks who were, not too upset, myself included, that he passed away. And, there's a lot of folks on the other side, kind of saying, well, you can't just, sympathize with this guy now. But really, I believe how a lot of folks in this country look at race is through the lens of someone like Rush Limbaugh, who has painted African Americans as scary, who has said horrible things about them. And has kind of pushed this narrative of African Americans being criminals. And so unfortunately, that's what a lot of people think. There's this scary black man kind of societal problem that we have. And, there's things around, defund the police. There's other, Black Lives Matter movement. There's a lot of stuff going on. But in some ways, I think we really need to kind of get the focus of this in that as a society, people look at Black people as scary. And that's a societal problem that we're going to have to figure out a way to fix that.
So with now Biden being in office, what do you think that Biden needs to do to kind of help or kind of push this movement forward and say, I'm going to help you?
I think what he has to do in general is good government. I think, and I'll kind of answer, this in 2 parts. The first part is just what I'm hopeful for Biden. I was hearing a story. I don't know if you watch Bill Maher. I'm a big fan, but he had a commentator on his show, and the commentator's father fought the World War II, was there at the end in Germany. And when Nazi Germany fell, the Germans promised a 100-year Third Reich to terrorize, the people of Europe, right? Or the occupiers, as they called them. Well, what we actually did then was put in place good government, right? We said, okay, instead of doing that, we got a job for you. Why don't you come down here, do some work? And so there's this idea that, kind of chaos or instability in a government and a society comes when that society is not functioning well. There's a lot of problems that we're dealing with right now. And that's one of the reasons why Trump got elected. So it's a big, tall order for Biden to try to help with some of that. But I think he's got to fix a lot of things with income inequality, and stuff around there, because I think that's one of the biggest problems in the country. When it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement and when it comes to policing, there's a lot of common sense things that he should do immediately. For example, mandating body cameras for every officer around the country.
Okay.
We need to look at how we charge officers differently. We need to, and just try to address some of the general, biases there that are in policing. There's another commentator that I really like watching on CNN named Van Jones. And one of the things he's talked about is he actually grew up in a poor, impoverished neighborhood. And he went to an Ivy League school. He was really good grades. He got into an Ivy League school. And he said he saw more drug use at that Ivy League school than he ever saw in the ghetto. One of the reasons why, some of these crime rates are so high is because there's so much police there. If you have that kind of police presence in the suburbs, you might find some crime there too.
Huh. That's interesting. So I kind of agree. One of my favorite news hosts I watch is on MSNBC. I watch Rachel Maddow.
Yeah,
I love Rachel Maddow because she's hard. She starts out and she tries to make sense of everything, and she's still trying to make sense of what's happening, not only just in Texas, but this whole impeachment thing. And she's picking fun at all of these Republicans one by one, and I just love her. And
I'm a huge fan.
Which brings me to what's happened to you recently, which we're going to go with the cancel culture, because that seems to be what everyone is talking about, including the Republicans, especially on Fox News, which I don't watch Fox News, I try not to. But with your YouTube, you recently did a Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I did watch that. I watched it fully, and I saw nothing wrong with that. You were actually just talking about it, showing clips and doing this, but YouTube decided we're going to kind of pull this down and we're going to review it because of misleading and false information, especially with against Marjorie Taylor. So,
and it was 2 videos there that got shut down. And yes, as you said, I've been on a little break from YouTube for the past 7 days because my channel got basically a suspension. Okay. So what had happened was I did 2 videos that they mainly flagged. One was talking about the impeachment of Joe Biden. And I started this video talking about, I made a funny joke where Republicans, they say, oh, Democrats, they never gave Trump a chance. And I'm like, they impeached Biden on day 1, since Marjorie Taylor Greene went to impeach Biden. But I used, I talked about her QAnon past. And so YouTube flagged that. And actually for that video, they said it was harassment against a protected group. So I guess a QAnon is a protected group now. Who knew? And the other video I did was a video about Sidney Powell. So Sidney Powell, she was one of Trump's let's just call them election fraud lawyers, trying to get the outcome of the 2020 election overturned. And so I did a video on her dropping her lawsuit, kind of a way like, hey, this is over. And I talked about these claims and how they're not true. They're unsubstantiated, and she's facing a massive lawsuit for it. I did give them a little bit of credit because one of the things I think people miss about some of this election fraud controversy is they're calling it election fraud because it's just kind of like a scary word. The one argument I will give to Republicans is that there were some states that kind of changed the rules without the legislatures, but even that's a little misleading. They gave their secretaries of state the option to change the election rules, but that's their main argument. But it's not a good argument because most people know, the pandemic, a lot of stuff has changed. We've all had to adapt. For instance,
here in the state of Pennsylvania, last year or it was the year before, it was 2019. The Republicans says they voted on these whole thing for mail-in ballots because they thought that was going to be the greatest thing in Pennsylvania. They voted for it. Then 2020 comes around, here comes the election, and then the same Republicans who all voted for this mail-in ballot are saying, oh yeah, we can't do this, we got to get rid of this now. I'm just like, but you voted for it.
And it's funny because I think Arizona has a mail-in ballot program, and it's one of the reddest states in the country. The funny part about this whole mail-in ballot controversy is that historically, mail-in ballots have always been huge for the Republican Party. They have a lot of older voters. They have a lot of, military voters that might be overseas. But historically, mail-in ballots have been great for them. And so the idea Trump was trying to shut all that down, even messing with the Postal Service, was just kind of, I mean, there were a lot of Republican insiders that were just like, what are you doing? Like, this is, this is our main thing.
I mean, some of them got wise to that, but moving back to this whole cancel culture with you mentioned
Yep.
with the YouTube, but there's now also with the Mandalorian star Gina Carano. She
Yep.
just got axed from Disney big time because what was it? She was being anti-Semitic. They found out, oh, you're being anti-Semitic on YouTube. Now, me personally, I've been reading people's comments, especially on Facebook. Their comment to this is like, "Oh, she's not being anti-Semitic. She's just speaking the truth." I'm like, "Excuse me, I know my history." She's
Yes.
basically trying to say it wasn't the government's fault that the Holocaust happened. It was because of the people of Germany.
Yep.
The Holocaust happened. I was like, she says they were killing neighbors. The neighbors were killing the Jews way before the government. I was like, "Excuse me." I said to myself, I was like, no. Hitler, he became Chancellor of Germany. He was the head of Germany. He had this big, grandiose mind and this ideas. I was like, let's blame it all on the Jewish citizens. And
Yep.
the Holocaust started. It had nothing to do with the neighbors. He's the one that enticed them. And this was like,
Exactly.
this sounds exactly what happened at the Capitol. He enticed them to say, let's be racist against the Jewish population, which they did. Neighbors might have attacked neighbors who were Jewish, hurt them, did things to them, and the Holocaust happened. It's our job. We need to remember, not forget what happened.
Exactly.
But we need to tell it correctly. We don't need to be anti-Semitic about it, especially like Gina was. And people here are defending her, and I'm like, guys, come on. You gotta see exactly what she was saying, and it's not correct.
Absolutely. And I was working on a segment for it before I got my own nice little taste of cancel culture. But she wanted to compare, and I think it's interesting that, it's very sad that we can compare nowadays to 1930s Germany, which is something you never want to be able to do. But she compared how conservatives are being treated now to how Jews were treated before the Holocaust. And it's just like, even saying that out loud sounds like a really dumb thing to put out there. Yeah. And so, and especially I think it's kind of interesting when you compare it to Trump, because, the big thing that Hitler used against the Jews was talking about income inequality. He basically said that, okay, Germany has been suffering economically, and the reason why is because of all these Jewish people who are taking advantage, and while everyone else is living in squalor. And so he's able to get a lot of hatred towards Jews, and which helped them out politically. And, Trump has definitely attacked minority groups, attacked immigrants with the same kind of concept, similar rhetoric there. And so, the whole canceling of Gina was, it seems justified. The one thing I'll give some of her supporters credit for is that Pedro Pascal put up who is the star of Mandalorian, also tweeted out something about comparing the kids in cages controversy to the Holocaust back in the day. And so they were like, okay, so she gets canceled for that, making that comparison, but how come he's not getting canceled for making that comparison? I think people got to realize Disney is a business, a massive business. I mean, this is the same company who removed the picture of Finn off their Chinese poster for the latest Star Wars movie because he's black. And so they didn't want him to be on the poster. So Disney is just a horribly run all over the place company.
Well,
but I did think they made the right move.
You're talking about Disney in the past. It was no hidden secret that they were anti-Semitic.
Oh, yeah.
It was no hidden secret. It's just basically they didn't like the Jewish culture, and that dates back way back, 1930s, 1940s. But that was what was happening at that time. And now that we've gone through what we call this cancel culture, and we've gone through this whole revision of Black Lives Matter, all this Asian lives matter. All races should matter, and this whole idea of Me Too movement. Now they're kind of slowly censoring things. It's like, oh, before you watch this movie, which is Dumbo, keep in mind that this movie has some stereotypical racism that dates back to and kind of do a little education before the movie
Sure.
starts. I mean, that's why there's no Song of the South on Disney. It kind of just said, we're going to forget this ever happened. You can't erase it. It's still out there.
Exactly.
People are still gonna sing zippity doo dah,
ZPD
regardless.
Day.
Exactly.
And I think, and as a society, we're always going to change. We're always going to move forward. And it's not it's obviously not a bad thing that we're like,
Yeah.
The Me Too movement, like, women's rights are something that's being appreciated more. It's not a bad thing that we're talking about, Black Lives Matter. So that was one of those funny things with Black Lives Matter. I've always thought, okay, we didn't say better than, we didn't even say equal. We're saying Black Lives Matter, and people have such a huge problem with it. But I think as a society, as we move forward and as we change, we're obviously going to evolve. We don't want to completely destroy the past, but we also have to recognize that some things maybe we've done back in the day don't lead to good things. Like, I think when I think about the Me Too movement, and how that's kind of changed a lot of things, and how women are treated. I saw a post on Facebook about a little boy who had a crush on a girl, and he asked the girl out, or he said, "I like you," or whatever. And the other girl was not interested. And he's talking to his aunt, and he's like, and the aunt's like, "You know what you're supposed to do now, right?" And the little boy's like, "I have to go after her. I have to keep going after her. I'm gonna have to get her to like me." And the aunt's like, "No, she said no. She's not interested. Move on." And that's how the society should work. There's a lot of things that we've kind of been doing for a long time that are not the best. You can kind of see where there's definitely bad. I'm sure you and I both have female friends that have had males harass them and not leave them alone. And they got that from somewhere. And so the idea that we're trying to purge that from our society is a good thing.
Oh, right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I do have some friends that are just like that, have some male friends, and I'm not going to mention names, but yeah, but I was talking with a friend about one today. But we're going to end this in this kind of move with the world in general, because the world now looks upon America since the riots at the Capitol. They're saying, so where's your democracy now? That this Capitol has happened. It's a big win for Vladimir Putin, especially, and big win for Xi Jinping in China, because they're now saying you can't promote democracy across the world while you're dealing with your own problems. But here you got the first presidents, I believe it was Canada, Justin Trudeau, and then you have France, you have England. They're the ones that came forward. It's like, finally, we can actually return back to normalcy and have some U.S. relations again, especially with Germany said that too, Angela Merkel. I mean,
yeah, I think really this Trump era has unfortunately ended this idea of American exceptionalism.
correct.
It has kind of given the world the idea, before this, still, the U.S. could kind of held their head high and thought, okay, we are the dominant country in the world. We run everything. And we can, the rest of the world looks to us and really can count on us. And unfortunately, the last 4 years have proven that that's not true. And as you talked about Xi Jinping, I don't think it's a coincidence what happened in Myanmar happened after the insurrection attempt.
Correct.
I mean, there's this idea that the United States is the shining city on the hill for democracy. It's something that the entire world can look as a symbol of democracy working. And we had our own citizens try to overthrow our own government, something that was unthinkable but before it happened, And so, I think this has definitely been a changing for America. I'm hopeful that we can kind of get back to where we're at before. But I think if there's one thing that the world's takeaway from the Trump years is that you just can't count on America anymore like you used to.
Correct. Yeah, we do have a lot of healing, and you got to keep your ears and your eyes open, because who can we trust anymore is what most people are saying.
Absolutely.
Can we trust social media and what we post? Are they going to censor us? I mean, that's what everyone is currently talking about. And that's why everyone's moving to, hey, look, it's Parler. It's back again. And sites like that. I'm just like, I mean, if you want to, at least you have an outlet, go for it. So we normal people on Facebook and YouTube can actually do what we do
content.
Best. And
I think like
get censored.
I'm hoping I don't get in trouble for this again, but my suspension should end tomorrow, so I might go live tomorrow. And so one of the things I want to talk about this is like this whole idea of censorship. And why it's not a good thing. I mean, and I'll admit, when they first, suspended Trump's account, I thought, hey, that's a good about time,
Yeah.
But the problem with it is that you're basically, what YouTube's trying to do is they're trying to get rid of independent commenters, independent media journalists and stuff, and
Right.
they just want you to go with the main folks. But
Yeah.
the problem with doing that is the main folks aren't always right, and it just kind of centralizes the power of information. In this segment I'm working on, I'm talking about the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Now, if I don't know if YouTube was up back then, but if I had my channel and I talked about how Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction and the government is lying into us and the Bush administration is lying to us, I'd be branded as misinformation. And I would be, canceled, or I'd be shut down when what I was saying was in fact true.
Yeah. I mean, now that I'm older and I look back on that, I realize, that was true. I was one of those protesters that went out and protested no blood for oil and end the war in Iraq. I do remember that. I graduated in 2004 from high school, and I remember the protests happening.
And that lie cost a million lives and $2 trillion. In fact, at lie, that the war in Iraq is costing every American $8,000.
It's just ludicrous, and we still haven't left, and we're still over there. And of course Trump's like, well, let's try to get rid of some troops and let's bring them home. And then Biden takes it. It's like, we really can't do that. You may have destroyed one, but they're now resurging again. They're back again.
Yep.
And then the main comment is, well, now they know how the Capitol was attacked, and that we as Americans can storm the Capitol. Now they're worried about, well, now they have that information. Now possibly they can do it too.
It's one of those things. Yeah, unfortunately, when it comes to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I did actually hear as history's gone back and forth, people kept trying the Bush administration. This is going to be one of those you break it, you bought it kind of things.
Yeah.
And that's why we haven't been able to get out of there, because we essentially helped to further destabilize the Middle East. I mean, ISIS wouldn't exist if we hadn't invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. One of the dumbest things we did is we arrested terrorists there. We all put them together in prisons, and then they got released. And so what we basically did was we created these colleges for terrorism, and we're able to create these networks for terrorism because of how we ran that war. And so it's just a horribly run thing, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of that.
All right. Well, I wish you luck and hope YouTube does come back. I mean, it's a shame because I loved your videos. I watched them.
Thank you.
Everything's great. Hope things go places, and do try to make that logo into a t-shirt, because I can definitely tell you, as a graphic designer, people will buy that.
I'll definitely hook you up.
If you build it, they will come. And that was from the movie Field of Dreams. Same idea. If you make it, they will buy it.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, definitely.
I checked out some of your stuff too. I'm a fan, so I really appreciate it.
All right, so thank you again, Peter Nicholas, and again, thank you for everyone that's been watching this week. Of course, this is This Week Live. I will catch you again next week with another exciting episode. But for now, this is Rocky Red Panda signing out. Till next week, you guys. Peace out.